Hello, welcome to tonight's Town Hall. My name is Kristen Keithley-White. I'm the Communications Manager for the school district here. And we want to thank you for taking time to join us today, for making space, which is kind of in your homes today, for us to connect with you. Is part of another thing that we're thankful for. I want to do an acknowledgement for the Kakite First Nation, whose traditional and unceded territories we work, play, live, and learn on, as well as all the other Coast Salish people whose territories this is. And that's part of what we do as our commitment to truth and reconciliation as one part of it, as also as a great reminder and an opportunity to think about the work we have in front of us as we think about the relationships we build and our level of understanding we need to continue to work forward on. Today we're here to answer questions, and we are so thankful for the patience you have given us as we have worked hard to try and pull a number of answers together when it comes to the return to school. You have sent in over 200 questions to us within the last few days, and we see the numbers are climbing quickly as we're cresting over 300 people on the call and climbing still. So we really appreciate the time that you have taken, the thought you've put into your questions, respecting the very personal space this comes, as a number of us are parents ourselves and really understand what is driving a lot of the questions that you have. So thank you for being part of this today. What you're going to see in a moment is Superintendent Hachlaf will guide you through and kind of do the first unveil of what this fulsome plan looks like. And we've taken all those questions you've provided to us, and it will be woven into what he will present forward, and you'll see, I believe, a lot of the questions. Do forgive us if there was a question that you presented that we don't quite get into the absolute detail of. A few of the questions were very kind of individual case basis and may be better answered at another point or in another piece. We're trying to make sure that we make the most of all of your time and cover as much of the material and give you the depth that you really need, knowing that we'll also have the opportunity to be sending you more information on Wednesday, and we'll be providing you at the end of the meeting an opportunity to, or an email address that you can follow up with if you have later questions. So we want to make sure that we get to all those pieces. If we don't get to them tonight, we will certainly give you opportunity to get to them later. We also appreciate the fact that Fraser Health, some of your questions were in relation to pieces that pertain more to Fraser Health as health protocols than to our space. So we sent those questions in advance to Fraser Health, and they provided us with some answers that the superintendent will walk through with you. We'll also, if you have more questions, we'll make sure that we can help facilitate getting some of those later if they relate to health pieces. We have a number, we'll go through this presentation. You'll kind of get a starting picture of the order of kind of what is going to be covered through the day. We have a number of district staff that are on the call ready to kind of pipe in with some little bits and pieces if there are points of clarification that you need along the way. We ask that you hold on to a number of your questions till we're getting a little bit closer to the end, because a number of the pieces may, if you can think about whether or not they will fit into a later section before asking them, we want to make sure that we kind of cluster all these pieces together in ways that make sense. But we'll be here, so if we don't quite answer the question in the moment, we will try our best to get to that later. I believe that's all from me. If you can take a quick moment and just see if your camera is off, if we can just get you to turn your video off, because we're seeing one or two faces. Most people I know have theirs off right now, but we're seeing one or two faces, and then there will be a number of us that can kind of help address little bits and pieces through the chat function throughout the meeting, and then again, the opportunity at the end to answer more. And at that point, I'm going to pass it off to our superintendent, who has all the information you have been waiting to hear. Thank you again for joining us today.
Okay, I think I'm on right now. Perfect. And just bear with me. Get everything showing. So Kristen, are we good? Looks like it. Okay, thank you so much for the introduction and setting that up. A big thank you for all the parents that have been able to join us this evening. I'm Hachlaf, the Superintendent of Schools, and I'd also like to recognize and acknowledge the Kakite First Nation, as well as all Coast Salish peoples on whose traditional territory we live, we learn, we play, and we do our work. I also want to acknowledge that a number of our trustees are able to join us this evening, including our board chair, Trustee Ansari. Again, appreciate you joining. While it's still technically summer holidays, I hope, like my family, you're able to enjoy the local region and within your travels. But I must admit too, that I can't wait to walk down the aisle one day and hear those magical words. This is your pilot speaking. Now, I know I have you on mute, but hopefully there's a few chuckles on the other end of the call. Certainly we're in this together. We are going to get through this, but we're navigating some challenging times with September startup. The next acknowledgement is all of you again. Now, the start of school is intended to be filled with excitement, but I know the unknown of what September will look like has caused a great deal of stress and has led to many questions. As Kristen mentioned, we had over 200 questions sent in. And I know you want to ensure the safety of your kids, and we share in that same mission, same objective. Believe me, I understand. I have one child in elementary school and now 2 in secondary, and this has been the #1 topic at my dinner table. Collectively, with over the 200 questions, what I've done is, and I certainly have my work cut out for me, the questions were phenomenal, and I've organized my entire presentation geared to best answer those questions. So here we go. The overview in terms of the questions received could, I think for the most part, in fact, 99% of the questions fell into the categories of health and safety protocols, K-12 schedules and what those are going to look like, and alternative options if you are not prepared to have your child return to school this September for a number of various reasons. And we're going to get into that at great depth and provide a number of answers as we give you an idea to anticipate what to expect for September startup. Now with that, there have been some guiding principles that the Ministry of Education has put forth, and those have remained, and they remain for the start of September as we move to stage 2. Our priority of maintaining a healthy and safe environment for all students, staff, and students remains paramount. We continue to provide services needed to support the children of our essential service workers. And apologies, just looking at some of the chat to make sure the sound's okay. Supporting vulnerable students who may need special assistance is equally a priority, and providing continuity of educational opportunity for all students. I'll just pause to make sure I'm not losing out. Kristen, feel free to let me know how sound is. I certainly don't want any parents not able to hear me, given their time and participation. Okay. Bear with me, I'm just going to get a clearance.
You sound great, and you're getting good feedback.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. So as we look into stage 2, here's a graphic that many of you have seen, and I put it up intentionally because it's really imperative that we look at this graphic and recognize the need to be both flexible and prepared to move between the stages. Please know it is the Ministry and Provincial Health Officer who provide direction to school districts. As this move, as you can see, from stage 3 hybrid to where we were in June, to now stage 2 for September, which involves full-time in-class instruction, is the most significant transition during this pandemic. Our ultimate goal, of course, is stage 1, but we know this will only be possible when an effective vaccine is developed and distributed, or failing that, reaching herd immunity. So there obviously is quite a bit of anxiety as we look at coming back full-time, but I want to take you through a number of the safety protocols that we have put in place. Prior to that, you'll recall that in June, many of you participated in the partial return in June. With that, we asked for your feedback on that experience. More broadly, we asked your feedback on things we needed to consider for the September restart. I don't want to overlook that because we had over 800 parents engaged, and you can see the stats that I've shared on your screen there. We had phenomenal feedback, And what we did in July was we shared that with all our principals and vice principals. It framed actions that we are taking. In fact, a number of trends surfaced with actions that you're going to see beginning September. They include the entire school district moving to one online platform using Microsoft Teams. That was a resounding piece of information we received. Other feedback included, should we need to go back to part-time instruction? Parents recognize that, and we recognize that with you returning to work, the half-day schedule was problematic, and for us to look at full days. Just to give you a sample, that was some of the great feedback we received from you, and we're incorporating that into our stage planning. The timelines, it's imperative to review that. Lots of great questions about timelines and what it means. So let me just take you through. We certainly did submit our template to the ministry by the deadline. I am still awaiting final feedback and approval from the ministry, which should come no later than tomorrow. You can see that on the chart. And then by Wednesday, you will be receiving, it likely will be Wednesday, you'll receive communication from me outlining the details, many of which I'm outlining today on the call, breaking down particular scenarios and what you'll need to do as a parent. That will be a fairly detailed piece of communication that again will be shared on Wednesday to the entire school district community. I should mention too, one date that wasn't on here. Friday, I believe that obviously is Friday the 28th. Principals will also be sending information. So part of the questions we received was what was happening at my child's school. And so please expect, following my communication, principals to connect with you to let you know more about orientation information. We had questions about what orientation activities will exist for perhaps your child is moving from elementary to middle or middle to secondary school or entering kindergarten. That information will be provided by the school principal, and they'll also outline in more detail what you can expect for the schedule on that first week. In particular, the Thursday, September 10th, and Friday, September 11th. By the way, parents, those are not full days, those will be partial days, and principals will clearly articulate the schedule so that you have that information well in advance to plan accordingly. And just back to the orientation comment, I wanted to stress that our principals are going to be focused on yes, we have a lot of work on orientation to do with COVID-19, but we also have and will continue to provide orientation opportunities for our students that will include tours for new students or incoming students. So that is being organized at our schools. So I wanted to alleviate some concern with questions I received around that. Okay, I'm going to dive into health and safety, a big part of laying the groundwork. And as you saw in my earlier slide, that'll take us to a nice transition to speak explicitly about school schedules, elementary, middle, and secondary. And I'm going to dive into options with quite a bit of detail that I know you as parents are hoping for. So diving into what shapes our health and safety protocols. As school districts, New West, one of the 60 in the province, we receive guidelines from the Ministry of Health and the BC Centre for Disease Control. And they provide, you see the top graphic there, the provincial COVID-19 health and safety guidelines. Those act as our guiding document to the work we do. They're continually updated. They are available on the ministry site publicly as well, but I wanted to flag that as a key document that we use as a school district. Of course, we also are legally obligated to fulfill the requirements for WorkSafe BC. And in doing so, we frame our own New Westminster School District COVID-19 safety plan. And we had one in June, and we've updated it yet again to reference the changes needed for stage 2. And so that documentation frames the orientation that we will engage in both for staff and students for the September restart. Now, I'll be the first to admit I have a binder of documents that I have to go through constantly, and it is quite a bit of information for parents to navigate through, and frankly, not the easiest to do. We recognize that as a school district, and we've done our best to frame a one-pager graphic there that I'm going to expand in the subsequent slides, so apologies if the writing's a bit small. But just to highlight that we pulled everything together to note the particular items we're doing in preparation for stage 2. We are working hard towards the health and safety of our staff and students, and we want in an easier way to highlight what actions we're taking. And this one-page graphic will be included as part of my communication on Wednesday, but I wanted to unpack this a little more because the graphic will allow us to answer many of the questions that were posed, and I'll be able to do that in greater detail. So in sequence, I'm going to start with many questions surrounding learning groups and distancing. Now you can see and have heard students organized in learning groups to reduce unnecessary exposure. At elementary and middle, you've heard and seen the communication from myself and the ministry that cohorts or learning groups of 60 for elementary and middle and up to 120 for secondary students. The higher number references secondary students' ability to better distance. Naturally, for elementary school students, it becomes a little more difficult given the age. Physical distancing is encouraged at all times. We are actively restricting the number of adults working with each learning group. That was another question I received. Wherever possible, we're cohorting teachers too. Keep in mind, learning groups are both students and adults. And of course, we want to encourage and in fact increase outdoor learning opportunities. Let me give you a little more detail than the writing just on that slide. So right now, we have many of our elementary schools grouped in learning groups of 30 or below, and our middle schools are 60 or below. The reason being, given their exploratory elective courses. Again, learning groups include students and adults and educators, and we are below these strict maximums. Our secondary school right now is averaging between 90 to 100 students in most of our grades, well below the 120 maximum. We've had many questions why the maximum is higher than the community gathering maximum of 50. The Ministry of Health considers schools controlled environments where we have a comprehensive set of safety measures in place. Moreover, schools are environments where the majority of people are children who are at a lower risk for transmitting COVID-19. Now, we are employing many physical distancing strategies. A few to highlight to you: ongoing education of students that will not just be part of the orientation, but throughout the entire year. Classroom configurations, increasing learning, the outdoor learning spaces that I spoke to earlier, minimizing group activities, use of floor markings and barriers where appropriate. Just to expand on that one, of course, we're going to have itinerant and district staff that might need to support a particular student and may not be part of the learning group. I'll get into what safety measures are in place regarding PPE, but there may be cases where that employee, that educator supporting that student in a station that we've created with the plexiglass barrier. Those have been installed in all of our schools for that purpose. Controlling access and new safety protocols. As parents, we've answered. Yeah,
we're coming in to quickly clean as somebody shared the thought that there was a little smudge happening that was making some light refraction happening. Very technical fix.
There we go. It's nice to have the support. Okay, controlling access and new safety protocols. So a number of initiatives have been taken on. Designated entrances and exits for students, you can see. We will continue. We've updated our mandatory daily health assessments for all students and staff. Staggered break times that I'm going to unpack in greater detail when I show you the schedules. That includes lunch times. A reduced number of students at New West Secondary School, and I'll expand a little more, but we've implemented a hybrid approach for all grades, and I'll unpack that, taking you through what the Monday to Friday schedule will look like. Certainly controlling access for visitors. Given the stage 2, and you heard the requirement for masks by all adults in common spaces, including secondary students, Masks will be required as visitors enter the building. Increased health and safety protocols around confined spaces. Masks, of course, required for bus drivers. I mentioned the plexiglass barriers installed in multiple locations within schools. This really is framing our new reality. We are going to be installing a district-wide consistency around posters and education around that at all of our buildings as well. Taking this further, a number of questions on what-if scenarios, and this understandably have dominated definitely a large percentage of questions. And the what-if scenarios in terms of whether a student or staff member develops symptoms of COVID-19. And this is where Kristen mentioned we had consulted with Fraser Health Authority, and I'll be able to get to that momentarily. But the graphic you see on the screen is taken right out of the COVID-19 guidelines that I showed you that are provided by the Ministry of Health and the BC Centre of Disease Control. There are clear guidelines that all employees will follow in the school district, and we will follow all the steps listed accordingly. I'm not going to read all those bullets. I'll leave it up on the screen for a bit while I speak to them. Certainly anyone experiencing symptoms should not return to school or work until assessed by a healthcare provider and their symptoms have resolved. Any student or staff in close contact of a confirmed case must stay home and self-isolate. Beyond our daily assessment tool, there is no rule for screening students or staff for symptoms, checking temperatures, or COVID-19 testing. Such activities will be left to healthcare professionals. Now, questions surrounding the threshold for shutting a school is the decision between the medical health officer and the school district. And there's not a black and white answer there. So that is the best answer at this time I can provide. We've had a number of very explicit scenario questions from parents, and we were able to consult with the Chief Medical Officer and the team at Fraser Health. You took the time to pose the questions, and I want to thank Carrie McDougall and Dr. Ingrid Tyler for taking the time to confirm the following responses. So I'm going to carefully go through these because they're questions that have surfaced in many households. If a child, parent, family member, teacher, staff has COVID-19 symptoms, what is the protocol for parents and the school? Do we get tested right away? Who do we contact to notify the school? Is it the school directly or general SD40 phone or email? In case there are siblings that go to the school or the child goes to an out-of-school care with other children who go to other schools. Clearly, this question is trying to understand the protocol. Let me share with you the response. If someone is experiencing symptoms of COVID, they can contact their healthcare provider or 811 or use the BC COVID-19 self-assessment tool to determine if they should seek testing. Further, anyone experiencing symptoms should not return to school until they have been assessed by a healthcare provider to exclude COVID or any other infectious disease, and their symptoms have been resolved. If someone is sent for testing, they should isolate until they receive test results and instructions from public health. If the test results are negative, the person should stay home from school until the symptoms resolve. If the test results are positive, public health will follow up with instructions. Tying it into the contact, the main office or school principal are always the preferred contacts for you as a parent to reach out on any particular scenario you want to provide an update to the school. Related, will students be allowed to come to school if a family member at home is ill with symptoms but has not yet tested positive? Students or staff may still attend school if a member of their household has a cold, influenza, or COVID-19-like symptoms, provided the student staff is asymptomatic. It is expected the symptomatic household member is seeking assessment by a healthcare provider and then determining if testing is requiring based on those symptoms. Third, if someone in either of my children's cohort or learning group gets ill with COVID-19, do I, as a self-employed person, have to stay home for 2 weeks and not have an income? Do all 60 children stay home? Does my other child or all of the teachers? This is obviously not a clear answer, and just moving away from the script for a moment from Dr. Ingrid Tyler, I just want to extend our understanding as a school district related to all the protocols on self-isolation and the stress and pressures that puts on any family, including perhaps a single parent household. Now, the answer that was been shared with us by Fraser Health involves on many key factors, such as interactions at the school, the incubation period before symptoms, public health measures in place in the classroom, and so on. There are a few different scenarios of notification, and this is determined through case and contact management. Close contacts will be notified by public health to self-isolate. If it is determined there is some risk of exposure, contacts will be asked by public health to either self-monitor or self-isolate. Again, it depends on the investigation process. Broad notification to self-monitor will also be provided by public health. If a person in a cohort is positive for COVID, what steps will be taken to notify caregivers and parents, and when will they be informed? If the cohort has to self-isolate for 2 weeks, will their siblings, household members have to as well? We spoke to this certainly in question 3, and so that would be consistent in terms of the notification directions. Again, notification direction will depend on the risk assessment completed by public health. Please know that due to confidentiality rules, Fraser Health cannot provide the test results of individual employees to the employer, nor can they encourage the employee to share their results with the employer. Fraser Health will provide test results to the employee, and if the employee chooses to share their results with the employer, that is up to them. The period of communicability for a case is considered to be from 48 hours prior to symptom onset to 10 days after onset of symptoms. If certain symptoms persist, the isolation would continue past the 10 days as the case would be considered to be infectious. Coughing may persist for several weeks, but that does not mean the individual is infectious and needs to remain in isolation. I have a couple of more questions to just ensure that your questions are answered. Has a threshold been set for the safe rate of infection by the province or district? I'd like to know where the line has been drawn between safe and unsafe rates of infection before we start the year. There is no clear threshold. In March, when schools closed, the guidance and public health measures were not in place. It is a provincial decision to determine if and when a school will change from stage 2 to another stage, and that would impact the entire province and all public schools as part of the BC School Restart Plan. Finally, how do we know when it's safe to return to school after isolating following an illness? Once symptoms have resolved, if an individual is unsure, they can seek advice from their healthcare provider. If someone is positive, public health will be in regular contact with that person throughout the isolation period. They can support them in determining when it is safe to return to school. Again, I want to thank our Fraser Health partners for providing such detailed answers, and as we require their medical expertise to provide that. So I certainly hope that has helped with, I know, some of the questions. It's not an exhaustive list, but we wanted to highlight a lot of the questions that certainly were overlapping. Moving forward, I wanted to focus on hand and respiratory hygiene. Just take a moment to hydrate. So many questions around this. We have been working hard to increase the number of hand washing spaces. We have just over 400, in fact, in the school district. We have purchased portable washing stations and installed them in every portable in the school district. Because hand washing is certainly the preferred method as opposed to hand sanitizer. Still, we have hand sanitizer in all available locations. We have strategically placed signage. I spoke to that a little bit earlier. And the requirement and the reminders on frequent hand washing, required hand washing, are included upon school entry, before and after breaks, or eating before and after the use of the playground, or shared equipment. No sharing of personal items, and no sharing of food or beverages. Related to hand and respiratory hygiene, certainly we receive questions on ventilation. Now, there's no current evidence that a building's ventilation system in good operating condition is contributing to the spread of the virus, but school districts have to ensure that our heating, ventilation, air conditioning, or what's called HVAC systems, are maintained by the standards and specifications set out by WorkSafe BC. In our district, all of our schools have fresh air intake systems as opposed to recirculated air systems. We follow what's called ASHRAE standards as recommended by the Ministry of Education. Our outstanding facilities and custodial team have changed all of our filters over the summer, cleaned the heat exchangers and ducts, and have inspected all of our classrooms to ensure we have operable windows. The cleaning and disinfection protocols are strict and certainly being enforced by us as a school district. All buildings are thoroughly cleaned and disinfected daily. We have protocols around what's called frequently touched surfaces, and you can see those must be cleaned at least twice daily. We have also increased our daytime custodians in our schools, and we work to remove hard to clean surfaces and reduce unneeded furniture to create more spaces in the classroom. All of our cleaning and disinfection protocols are in accordance with the BC Centre for Disease Control for public settings. And I think taking this a step further, parents would appreciate us sharing a bit more of the breakdown in terms of the over $45 million funding that was allocated to school districts from the province. For New Westminster, is what was called the Safe Return to School grant, and the actions we took that were geared to explicit purposes. Our portion, if you will, was just over, you can see, $488,000. You can see the amount of over $269,000 we have applied to additional custodial staffing that I was referencing, over $100,000 in hand hygiene that included the portable hand washing stations I spoke to, cleaning supplies, reusable masks, and technology. Technology will support us with some of the replacement that needed to be done, and ensuring, and just to highlight here, we'll be supporting all families throughout the year, just like we did in June. If there is a need for technology in the home to support the learning environment, that will certainly continue when we look at exploring online options, for instance, or hybrid models. Okay, linking to masks and face coverings, lots of questions around PPE, understandably. Now, we have mandatory masks for teachers on call or district itinerant staff. So lots of questions about what would happen if you have a teacher on call coming. Certainly, they're not part of the learning group. So physical distancing and wearing a mask covering would apply. A mandatory mask for staff, middle and secondary in high traffic and common areas is required. We are we're requiring staff, middle and secondary students when moving away or when interacting outside their learning group. We see that as a valuable step for safety. Masks required for all adults entering any school. Reusable masks available upon request. Related to the budget component that I spoke to, all staff and students will be receiving 2 reusable masks. And then mask use in other scenarios is a personal choice that will be supported. And I also wanted to frame that, certainly recognize that students and our staff may decide to wear a mask even within a learning group. And of course, that would be widely accepted. Supports available. A number of questions around supports available during a difficult time with the pandemic. And as I mentioned, during a difficult transition as we move to full-time instruction. In-person and remote learning options available to accommodate all unique family circumstances. We want to work with you in every possible way. That's the key reason we wanted to engage in this forum as opposed to just offering one-way communication. And you came and gave us just some amazing questions for us to focus on. Meal programs will be returning to individual schools with new COVID plans in place, but indeed our caterer, our provider will be offering that meal support again. We recognize, and many comments both from parents and students sent to me and the Board of Education around social and emotional supports and ensuring they're available for students and staff. We will continue with full-time access to all specialized supports. Just because we're in a pandemic, we're not compromising on our ability to support students with diverse needs, from counseling, our educational assistants, speech and language pathologists, for example, strong start centers. We're also looking to restart those. Naturally, we're going to have to take new protocols, make those by appointment, apply physical distancing measures. Going further with the supports and just honoring the questions I received related to supports, a few other components I wanted to expand on. Regardless of scheduling options, all students will have the opportunity to attend on a full-time basis. Students will continue to receive supports identified within their individual education plans or IEPs. Students will continue to still have access both in-class and pull-out supports provided by our learning support teachers, or educational assistants, counselors, childcare workers. Our students with diverse abilities who are not able to physically distance will not be excluded from learning groups. Simply put, inclusion remains a priority, and we will implement prevention and exposure control measures such as assisted seating, visual support, and video modeling. In terms of mental health, a huge area of focus for us and needs to continue to be, we are continuing to provide professional development training for teachers to support themselves and supports for our students. Our trauma-informed practice allows us to approach individuals who are experiencing additional stress or trauma through a compassionate lens. And the Ministry of Education has provided educators with trauma-informed resources. More broadly, when it comes to a staffing level, I know we've had many questions around counseling at different areas, including our secondary school. We're redeploying staff to provide additional counseling support, and I want to acknowledge that needs to be something we'll continue to monitor accordingly, and we'll need to adapt and be flexible to ensure we're providing the mental health supports required throughout the school year, not just for the month of September. Okay, as promised, I think that hopefully provides at least a good layer within the questions received to move to the schedules and break this down in further detail. So as promised, I wanted to provide some context to the schedules. I'm going to jump right into elementary schools, and what you see is a model of an elementary school where we're looking at the welcome bell, working to have a designated entry. You can see where we're landing for a framework of recess, instruction, lunch, before the dismissal. Okay, a few things to pull out here. One, we certainly will be considering the staggered recess at sites. Here's an example of one school, and what they've done is they'll have a staggered recess from 10:25 to 11:40. And then they're going to have one at 10:40 to 10:55. There are going to be particular site considerations that principals will need to make, ensuring the health and safety of staff and students. Another example will be Richard McBride, our school that is going with our construction project in place. So our principal there certainly will be working with the community to ensure the safety of our students and may need to customize based on those site needs. Additionally, in the elementary schedule I wanted to highlight, you'll notice the lunch time is also done in intervals where we're breaking up the cohorts for students to eat lunch, then play after, and doing that with a different cohort, but reversing it and then swapping. So again, just our ability to stagger population, break that up during that supervision. Those are models that will be employed. Going back to one of the earlier slides that I mentioned, principals will be communicating with you their schedule, breaking this down in greater detail, providing those site explicit considerations that I spoke about earlier, and getting into more detail along with the schedule on what that Thursday and Friday looks like for planning purposes. And I'm sure there'll be more information, but those are certainly the key pieces that I know I've had many questions on. Going to middle school, very similar process here. Naturally, we're working with some larger cohorts, closer to 60, as I mentioned. And we have some complexities given the exploratory or elective courses. This gives you an example of a cohort that has 2 teachers, a learning group with 2 teachers, teacher A, teacher B. You see they would have separate advisories with designated entries, the instruction. There is a staggered time at the start, a staggered time at the end in this case. And then the lunch model would apply, very similar to the elementary one I showed. And this is a model that will be applied at all 3 of our middle schools. And so the principals, again, will be providing that level of detail. But I hope the graphic is helpful on showing what we're working to do in terms of the staggered recess, start times, and then all the other information that'll come with pickup and drop off as well. Okay, saving definitely the most complex for last is our secondary school. Being one of the largest secondary schools in the province, this to say has been certainly a lot of challenges to work out that our secondary administrative team have been working hard over the last few weeks. I thought everyone would appreciate this picture because I did have questions about the new school and the project timeline. What you're looking at is a picture of a learning neighborhood on the 3rd floor. This photo was recently taken. The classrooms are on the outside of the space in the middle, which is a common area. And this is built on this campfire concept that many of you have heard me speak to on about. Before diving into the schedule, I wanted to appropriately comment on questions around the timeline. And I had questions related to, even if we could move to the new secondary school, might we consider being able to use 2 sites as an opportunity to separate the school population? So let me tackle those for a moment. I think I'll begin by saying I am pleased to say that the project has rebounded very well with the return of our labor force on site, and most of the building supplies that were delayed are now on site or have confirmed delivery dates. Further, we remain very optimistic about our ability to move in during the 2020-21 school year. But as we know, any provincial or global setback related to COVID-19 could still cause further delays. We are cautiously optimistic and will continue to monitor and provide updates to the community once we can confidently provide those dates that I know our community seeks, and believe me, so do we. Questions surrounding moving into the new school and keeping the current building open at full capacity as a strategy to spread the school population is really highly unlikely, given the regulations around occupancy. Still, partial occupancy scenario may be a consideration that our team has been working with, but simply put, again, our goal is to be prepared to move into the entire school population at once, but we are considering alternate options if need be. That has not been the case right now, given the schedule currently is progressing quite well. So without further ado, going to the secondary schedule and looking at the screen, quite a bit of detail for me to take you through. So appreciate your patience and letting me kind of navigate this. What you're looking at is a grade 9 model, and there are some key differences here. We've worked hard at looking at what the best in terms of our students, our staff. We've taken the feedback I mentioned that we received in June. We wanted to apply a lens that looked at health and safety, but also innovation as well, to support the educational needs of our students. With that, we're quite proud of the fact that we've been able to hold on to the semester model for grade 9. And this is critical, we believe, in terms of the transition. Moving from middle to secondary is a significant transition, and our ability to maintain a semester schedule as opposed to a quarter that I'll share momentarily was, in our view, is a big accomplishment. So you're going to see that Monday to Friday instruction takes place for students and the selection of their courses. And that gives you the time for transition. You have lunch built in, of course. The considerations and the bullets below you can see there. And certainly, speaking of the group size, I mentioned right now, we're hovering around 90 to 100. So we're quite comfortable in terms of being below the maximum 120. Taking this a bit further, we are, though, providing a variety here in every grade, and I'm going to show you some graphics in a moment. Every grade will have the equivalent of 1 day of remote learning instruction. This will allow us to provide some of the space required to accommodate the physical distancing around our common spaces. I think I certainly have seen some of the pictures from schools across the border with packed hallways in the secondary schools with almost 2,000 students. We've taken action around making sure we're reducing that size to allow more movement and space. So again, what we're doing is every grade will have the equivalent of 1 day of remote instruction. Beyond the health and safety requirements that I've spoken to, we also believe at a secondary level, our students can benefit from having online instruction. Unlike some of the experiences in June where, we were learning as well and our staff did just an amazing job given the climate, we want to continue with our learning in supporting online environments. And we want to do that in a synchronous method or real time. And I'm going to unpack that a bit in the next slide here. Before I do, the grade 10 and 11, 12 model is going to go to quarters. Okay, so unlike grade 9, the remaining grades, grade 10, 11, and 12, are moving to what are going to be 10-week increments. And then there'll be a rotation. So for grade 10, 11, 12 students, they have 2 courses per day, an AM and a PM course with lunch in the middle. And certainly the question why there, first and foremost, we could not use semester system to accommodate the huge variety of electives that senior students have, and we have to meet their needs in terms of their post-secondary requirements. If we went to a semester model, we would have had to severely restrict choice, and that simply wasn't an option for us. So accordingly, we've moved to 10-week increments where you can see here, you get the block A, B rotation, and after every 10-week period, we would be creating, as permitted, a new learning group. I want to go to the graphic here because it certainly will help. So grade 9, here's a student sample, just for you to see a semester 1, semester 2. The highlighted column in green will represent that Wednesday right now, our proposed model prior to ministry approval will be that Wednesday grade 9s will be taking their courses online in real time. So the times for, you see math is from 8:34 to 9:59. That student will take math online in a remote setting during that same time connecting with the teacher. Okay, that is the definition of real-time learning that we will be instituting as part of our schedule. When we look at the other grades, for grade 10 to 12, they will not be full day increments, rather they're half days, but they're still the equivalent of 1 day remote. And this will give you an idea of what a grade 10 sample schedule is at the top, a grade 11 sample schedule, and a grade 12, okay? And so what the schedule you'll be receiving will clearly outline when the grade will have their remote learning time. Again, that helps us significantly with the school population and dealing with traffic and the physical distancing strategies we want to employ. So if from a percentage standpoint, it means that every secondary student will be receiving 80% face-to-face instruction with 20% remote learning. Whew. I hope I didn't go over that too quickly, but I want to say these schedules and this level of detail is going to be outlined within my letter on Wednesday as well. Okay, looking at the time, I really need to push through with the options. And so really taking you through that. Yeah. I'm going to be able to cover this in a fair amount of time. So overwhelmingly, parents want to know, what are my options based on my own unique circumstances? Let me begin to take you through the circumstances so we understand what those entail and the language surrounding them. So the province has outlined, certainly we have students with immune suppression. Now, the provincial health officer rather has noted that really even students with immune compromised systems can very much attend school, provided we have put the safety measures in place. They have also outlined that we understand there will be rare circumstances with students or perhaps family members within the household have what we would call a severe immune suppression case. Now, that will be determined on a case-by-case basis. The requirement is, as noted by the province, to obtain a doctor's note to provide us a level of detail so we know how to support your child. And in these cases, your action would be to contact your school principal directly to take them through your unique circumstance. Okay, this is for that severe medical case where you've got that doctor's note to provide that level of background, and you're looking for what we would call in some ways a hospital homebound type program to provide some customized supports. This does not mean you couldn't still pursue an online program, but again, if you feel you're in this category and this level in terms of the immune suppression, please contact your child's principal. Perhaps you're not sure. I'm still going to encourage you to talk to your child's principal. They'll work with you and our district staff to really assist in understanding what your unique circumstances are and find the best solution for you. When we look at homeschooling, I want to be clear, homeschooling in the term I'm using is not what happened in June. Homeschooling is an alternative method of teaching that is led by provincial policy where the parent delivers an educational program to children at home. Homeschooling is the full responsibility of a parent and is not supervised by a BC certified teacher. Parents need to contact their homeschool to register for homeschooling by September 30th. That is a provincial date set because it aligns with our funding requirements. We're not encouraging parents to leave us in homeschool, but we're respecting your decision. And I want to make sure you understand all the options available to you. And this will be outlined in my letter as well. Now, definitely more questions around our Home Learners program. Again, not to be confused with homeschooling. I'm referring to our Home Learners program at Hume Park, focusing on K-8. We have updated information that we feel is providing even greater clarity to go look so you understand what a home learner program is. You can see in my description, it is online learning supported with up to 50% face-to-face instruction. Parents are a big part in supporting the program. We have dedicated and trained teachers. And it's certainly a great program for our students within the district. We have definitely heard a request from parents to say, can I get a space or is it full? Right now we have additional spaces available that will be part of an open registration window that I'll speak to, but we're going to note we have limited capacity. And if we exceed that capacity, we're going to need to entertain a lottery system. But we do have additional space. It'll depend on demand. And I will recap these options momentarily. Now, finally, online learning, easily the biggest question I've received in terms of availability. Now, we have our senior or graduating program, online program that will continue, but we are proud to expand and offer an online learning for K-12, including our newly developed K-8, include real-time learning supplemented by videos and independent work. Parents and guardians, you can really want to note that you want to assess the need of your child to see if this level of learning is right for them. Students grade 9 to 12 will have the option to select one or more courses to be taken online. You saw the schedule that I showed with you in secondary school that has 1 day of remote learning. Perhaps you and your child are going to decide, I'd like to have more remote learning. Then you would be subsequently applying for an additional online course or completely online. That'll be a decision you'll need to discuss with your child. But within my letter on Wednesday, I will be asking parents to select the option they feel is best for their child. We do not want to penalize families who are selecting an online option. And for that, we'll be honoring their spot within their currently registered school for the following school year. Now, please understand, we're also examining our ability to consider a transition option. What that means is, can we consider and fulfill an option that would allow parents a time window should they wish to return back to their home school for the remainder of the school year over the course of that year. Now, given the staffing and funding constraints, we need a better idea of how many families would be interested in this option. Please understand, we're going to do everything we can to meaningfully support your child's education, but there are some considerable issues and logistics that we need to consider, and they're also going to be impacted by the scope and how many parents would be interested in that. So unfortunately, as well, our online program will not be able to accommodate students enrolled in a program of choice, such as French immersion. Following my letter on the 26th, here's what you can expect. We will have detailed these options. We all have created a registration window. Keep in mind, this will need to be a fairly short turnaround to confirm your registration choice, and then we're going to proceed with our planning. And so this is a key piece of communication coming out on the 26th. We are, in fact, I'm going to be on a call with the Deputy Minister tomorrow to get a further update. So a lot of things are moving very quickly, and I'm doing my best to give families up-to-date communication, and I'll outline all of that within my letter. Again, I referenced online learning. We're expanding that K-12. We're going to need to assess our capacity based on scope. I referenced the homeschooling option, which is removing your child entirely from the public school system. We have expanded scope at Hume Park, but space is limited. So certainly those are options that you'll need to have further discussions on, and certainly can follow up with the district if you've got more questions, or you know, I can appreciate you want more detail, or my explanation was not clear enough and you're wanting to find out certainly more. When we look at our communication and key dates, I've referenced a lot. Significant letter coming out by me on Wednesday to outline all of these options, and we're going to be very clear as to, if you select an option, what does that mean in terms of the impact it might have. We'd love to guarantee placement if you decide online's not for you, but that's going to be very problematic for us. So we're doing our best to create flexibility wherever we can, but we have huge staffing considerations to adjust and to monitor. The application process for alternatives and the options I spoke about will open then the following day on Thursday, August 27th. We have yet to finalize the end date. That'll be communicated within my letter. Parents, again, it'll be a short turnaround. We'll send a school messenger reminder as well to all families. I'm excited about a student town hall. Give a similar opportunity for some great questions I've received by students this Thursday. Email from schools, that's the one I was referencing about principals, to give you that level of detail for your site. And then the staff town hall, a meeting with our local union presidents weekly. The request there was to select a date closer to the conclusion of the summer holidays, just prior to startup. That's why I am looking forward to the town hall on Thursday, September 3rd. And I know I have not answered perhaps all of the questions, but I really have worked hard reviewing honestly over 200 questions and really doing my best to weave in your questions throughout this entire presentation. I do apologize if I missed your particular question or you feel that it needs further clarity, and we welcome follow-up at the email address you see on the screen, and you'll have a prompt follow-up. With that, I'm gonna release control here and just allow Kristen to pick up here for a moment, and I haven't had a chance to just let me just do this. 1 second, Kristen. How do I, oh, here we go. Oh, shoot, Kristen. Trying to make you a host. Kristen. You want to come here? I can't seem to make you host.
Little sprint down the hallway.
How do I make you host and where are you?
You want me just to...
Yeah, maybe just go here because of the time.
Yeah.
Okay, folks, just trouble transferring that back up to Kristen. So just going to have her take over on my screen because she had the opportunity with the rest of the team to monitor the chat, understanding we're right at 8 o'clock. Kristen.
Thank you. I know that we weren't able to get through a number of the questions that you posed. I do have a list of them. I think the best method is to follow up just to make sure that we don't miss anything. So please follow up, info@SDE40. I know we were able to address some of the questions along the way. Again, we thank you so much for being part of this and sharing your evening with us and making space for this conversation. And anything else?
Yeah, just thank you again, everyone. Real pleasure to have all of you join virtually on these unique times, and we're working with you. We want the best for your families, and stay tuned, more information to come. Have a good night, everyone.